this is probably the least satisfying answer that I'll say it up front, and just try not to roll your eyes at this answer because I can see all your faces. But it was like I remember talking to someone, they were like, oh man, Jesus built his church. And I was like, okay, I get that. Thank you for sharing that theological truth with me. But how do I do this? And they're like, first you have to trust that Jesus built his church. And I'm like, all right, okay. So I'll listen to you ramble on about this. And I want to get to the practical. And before we get to the practical stuff, I really want to impress that on, I really want to throw that phrase that pissed me off. And it might not give you the most comfort in the world, because what it really does is it takes control out of your hands, and it says, no matter how hard you try, you can't do this because it's not yours. Like nothing that is of value. We can't do anything of value. Apart from him, we can do nothing. And Jesus built his church. One of the first ways that I've seen this in our church story is one of the people that I met with early on. I had a list of people who lived in Harlem and did ministry in Harlem, and I had no intention of like trying to steal members at this time. I've tried to do it later times, but I didn't do it this time. And this one guy on the list, I just emailed a bunch of random people, and then he emails me like a month later, like, hey, can you come up to Lake Champion for like a Young Life thing, which is 2 hours away, on Thursday. And at this point, I think I was still like practicing law half time. And usually I would have like so much work. And for whatever reason, I didn't have anything that day. And I was like, you know what? I don't even know this dude. I'm going to drive up like 2 hours away. So I did it. And then when I got there, I met him and I was like, oh, this dude is really cool. Because I was just going to still ask him questions about how to do ministry in Harlem. And before I knew it, I found out that like he had been a part of a church plant that was kind of dying, or was really like on its last leg. And the leadership was super unhealthy. And he and his wife were looking really to be a part of something else. And I had no idea. And he also had been doing work with kids in Harlem for like 8 years. And those kids who were 17 were now 25. So in terms of the culture of art, and all of these people were like born and raised in the neighborhood in Harlem. They like grew up down the block from where our church meets. So then our first community group was made up of people that I had met in coffee shops, but even the diversity, even the economic diversity came 100% through a random interaction with some dude who's now an elder in training at our church. And he's one of the pastors on our staff. And he still works for Young Life. And man, our church would not be anything resembling what it is today if it were not for that meeting, if it weren't for the fact that I didn't have my calendar, that I didn't have any cases on that day in the calendar, and that he and I hit it off and he's one of my best friends now. But that stuff, like, man, there's no plan for that. Like at our first membership meeting after the church had launched, we went out of the room and said, why are you here today? Like the first 5 people said, oh, Aswan said to come. And I'm like, you're joining a church because Aswan said it. And they were like, yeah. So, I mean, really early on, like the culture of the church was shaped by this interaction. And I want you guys to be praying for the Lord to open up doors, so that your story will always point back to the glory of Jesus, who has built your church, and not a great plan.